6 aircraft, 8 minutes, 360 rounds of ammunition, 0 backup. The armorer called it a suicide mix. The squadron called him crazy. The Japanese called it impossible. Here's how one Navy pilot with a failing engine proved everyone catastrophically wrong. June 19th, 1944, 10:03 hours, 140 miles west of Saipan, Philippine Sea. Lieutenant Junior Grade Alexander Vraciu, 25 years old, F-6F Hellcat fighter. Combat Air Patrol. Vraciu's radar, 450 Japanese aircraft inbound. Largest aerial armada ever assembled for single naval strike. Standard fighter doctrine: maintain formation, conserve ammunition, engage with squadron support. Vraciu's engine was failing. Oil pressure dropping, supercharger rattling. By every regulation in the Navy handbook, his plane was grounded. He launched anyway, alone, into a sky that was about to fall. What the Japanese didn't know, the American pilot diving toward their formation wasn't carrying standard ammunition. Hidden in Vraciu's wings, 2,400 rounds of M8 armor-piercing incendiary. No tracers, no steel filler, just chemical fire that burned at 3,000 degrees on impact. The Navy had explicitly forbidden this loadout. Instructors called it thermally unstable and operationally reckless. Vraciu had spent 24 hours fighting his own armorer just to load it. Only thing standing between Admiral Ozawa's strike force and the American fleet, a vibrating Hellcat with a suicide ammunition belt flown by a pilot the squadron mockingly called the janitor. This engagement stayed buried in Bureau of Ordnance archives for 40 years. The ammunition configuration Vraciu used violated 3 separate naval safety protocols. The resulting ballistics data was classified secret until 1984, not because of what it revealed about American capabilities, but because of what it proved about institutional resistance to innovation.
This account draws from declassified action reports released in 1984 and preserves an important chapter of Pacific naval aviation history. Understanding these engagements provides insight into the tactical realities faced by carrier pilots in 1944. To understand how Vraciu survived what should have been a mathematical impossibility, we need to go back to East Chicago, Indiana. 1943. Alexander Vraciu wasn't supposed to be a warrior. He was supposed to be an accountant. Born March 2nd, 1918. East Chicago, population 54,000, steel mills and rail yards. Father worked the blast furnaces at Inland Steel. Family, working-class Croatian immigrants who valued practical skills over romantic notions. Vraciu studied accounting at DePaul University. Numbers, precision, patterns. That's what he understood. Then, Pearl Harbor happened. He enlisted January 1942. Flight training, Pensacola Naval Air Station, 240 hours. Instructors noted adequate stick skills, exceptional gunnery scores, methodical to point of obsession. That obsession is what got him in trouble. While other aviation cadets were memorizing dive angles and radio procedures, Vraciu was down in the armory, bothering the ordnance men. He wanted to understand the ammunition. Standard Navy fighter loadout, 1943. Mixed belt. 2 armor-piercing rounds, 1 incendiary, 1 tracer. 4 bullets, 4 different weights, 4 different trajectories. General-purpose recipe designed to do a little bit of everything. Vraciu hated it. This belt is a compromise, he told the Master Chief Armorer at his first squadron assignment aboard USS Intrepid. Compromises get you killed. The chief looked at the 24-year-old ensign like he was legally insane. Son, this belt was designed by men with engineering degrees from Annapolis. You're fresh out of flight school. Stick to flying, we'll stick to loading. Vraciu didn't stick to flying.
He spent his off-duty hours in technical manuals that made other pilots' eyes glaze over. Bureau of Ordnance Bulletin 1941-7A, Comparative Terminal Ballistics of .50 caliber projectiles. Thrilling stuff. Most pilots used it as a doorstop. Vraciu read it like scripture. He discovered something the manual writers in Washington either didn't understand or chose to ignore. The Japanese Zero fighter had no armor plating for the pilot and no self-sealing fuel tanks. American planes, Hellcats, Corsairs, were flying tanks. rubber-lined fuel cells that sealed around bullet holes, steel plates behind the pilot's head. You could riddle them with holes and they'd bring their pilots home. A Zero was different. A Zero was a balsa wood frame wrapped around a gasoline bomb. If I hit a Zero with armor-piercing steel, Vraciu argued to anyone who would listen, the bullet goes straight through, clean hole. The pilot flies home, patches it with tape. But if I hit him with incendiary, pure incendiary, no filler, no tracers, he doesn't leak, he burns. The other pilots in VF-16 thought he was overthinking it. Just point the nose and pull the trigger, college boy. They'd laugh over cards in the ready room. You're not designing the bullets, you're firing them. They called his mixed belt theories the janitor's obsession, because Vraciu was always cleaning up technical details everyone else ignored. The nickname stuck, the janitor. It wasn't a compliment. But Vraciu kept pressing. He kept arguing. He kept wearing down armorers with sheer stubborn persistence. By June 1944, transferred to VF-6 aboard USS Lexington, he'd finally convinced one sympathetic ordnance chief to load his guns exactly how he wanted. 100% M8 armor-piercing incendiary, silver-tipped death, no tracers, no guidance system, just invisible fire. The chief warned him, "These rounds run hot. You hold the trigger too long, you'll cook off the belt inside your wing. You'll blow your own arms off."
Vraciu nodded. "Then I won't hold the trigger too long." The squadron called it the suicide mix. June 19th, 1944 would prove who was right. By June 1944, the Pacific War had reached an inflection point. The Japanese Navy was dying, but it was dying with its teeth bared. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa commanded the mobile fleet. 9 aircraft carriers, 5 battleships, 450 operational aircraft. This was Japan's last functional carrier force. Lose this, and the home islands were defenseless. American intelligence knew the Japanese were coming. They didn't know when or where. Then, morning of June 19th, radar operators aboard USS Lexington saw something that didn't make sense. The radar scope didn't show individual aircraft. It showed a solid wall of noise moving across the screen at 300 miles per hour. Fighter Direction Officer Lieutenant Joseph Eggert stared at the display. He counted the blips. He recounted. He called his supervisor. "Sir, I'm showing 450 plus contacts inbound, range 140 miles, closing fast. 450 aircraft, the largest single aerial strike in the history of naval warfare. And it was aimed directly at Task Force 58, the American carrier fleet supporting the invasion of Saipan. The math was simple and terrifying. American fleet, 15 carriers, 956 embarked aircraft. But most were already airborne on strike missions against Japanese bases, the defensive fighter screen protecting the carriers. Approximately 220 Hellcats, 450 attacking against 220 defending. Worse, the Japanese strike was layered. Torpedo bombers at wave-top level, dive bombers at 12,000 feet, Zero fighters at 20,000 feet providing top cover. It was a three-dimensional meat grinder, and the American pilots would have to fight through all 3 layers while protecting the carriers behind them. Lose the carriers, lose the invasion. Lose the invasion, extend the war another year. Another year equals another 100,000 American casualties projected by War Department statistical analysis.
Scramble klaxon, 09:45 hours. Every flyable fighter on every American carrier launched simultaneously. The deck of USS Lexington looked like controlled chaos. Aircraft spotters screaming, propellers blurring, steam catapults kicking planes into the air every 30 seconds. Vraciu climbed into Hellcat F-31, his assigned aircraft, his familiar cockpit. He flipped the battery switch. Fuel pressure, good. Oil pressure, dropping, not good. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engine coughed to life, belching blue smoke. The whole airframe vibrated, not the healthy rumble of 2,000 horsepower, but a sick, metallic chattering that meant something inside was loose. The plane captain, a 19-year-old kid from Nebraska, climbed up on the wing. "Sir, this bird's got a bad mag. Crew chief says she's grounded pending maintenance." Vraciu looked at the sky. It was full of smoke trails. The rest of his squadron already climbing toward the intercept point. He looked at the kid, unhooked the chocks. "Sir, regulations.
unhook the chocks. The F-6 Hellcat wasn't the most elegant fighter in the Pacific. It was heavy, 12,500 pounds fully loaded, 50% heavier than a Zero. The Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0 had specifications that made it legendary. Climb rate, 3,150 feet per minute. Hellcat, 2,980. Could outclimb Americans to altitude advantage. Turn radius, 520 feet at 180 knots. Hellcat, 780. Could outturn Americans in dogfight. Wing loading, 22.6 pounds per square foot. Hellcat, 35.6. More agile, more responsive. On paper, the Zero was superior. But what Japanese intelligence hadn't discovered, the Hellcat's weight wasn't a weakness. It was a weapon. In a dive, the Hellcat's extra 3,000 pounds of steel and armor became pure kinetic energy. The big Pratt & Whitney could push the plane past 450 knots in a vertical drop, speeds where the lightweight Zero's airframe started to flutter and shake, threatening to tear itself apart.
The Hellcat couldn't outturn a Zero, but it could outdive, outclimb in short bursts using water injection, and most critically, out-survive. Vraciu's Hellcat carried 212 pounds of armor plating, bulletproof glass, self-sealing fuel tanks with 3-layer rubber construction that closed around bullet holes. A Zero carried none of that. To save weight, Japanese engineers stripped out the armor, the rubber fuel cell liners, the pilot protection. The Zero was a sports car. The Hellcat was a bulletproof truck. Vraciu felt the catapult officer's hand drop. The steam piston fired. The Hellcat rocketed down the 90-foot deck, accelerating from 0 to 90 miles per hour in 2 seconds. The G-forces crushed him back into his seat. The plane dropped toward the water as it cleared the bow, too heavy, too slow. Then the big propeller bit into the humid air and clawed upward. He was airborne. His engine was coughing, oil pressure needle flickering, windscreen already smearing with a greasy rainbow film leaking from the failing gasket. But he was up. He keyed his radio. "Lexington, this is Vraciu. Airborne and climbing." The fighter direction officer's voice crackled back. "Vector 270, Angels 20. Many bogeys. Repeat, many bogeys, very many." Vraciu acknowledged and pushed the throttle forward, past the mechanical stop, into the red-painted section marked Emergency War Power. The engine screamed in protest. "Don't quit on me yet," he muttered, patting the instrument panel like it was a nervous horse. "We've got work to do." Vraciu climbed alone. The rest of VF-6 had already formed up and was racing toward the intercept point 60 miles west. He was late, struggling with his dying engine, falling behind. At 18,000 feet, he broke through a cloud layer, and he saw them. It wasn't a formation, it was a migration. The Japanese strike force filled the western horizon like a storm front made of aluminum and rage. They were stacked in layers, a massive 3-tiered wedding cake of death.
Bottom layer, Nakajima B-5N torpedo bombers, hugging the waves at 500 feet. Middle layer, Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bombers at 12,000 feet, flying in loose, sloppy V formations. Top layer, at least 50 Mitsubishi Zero fighters weaving back and forth at 20,000 feet, providing top cover. Vraciu stared through his oil-smeared windscreen. His brain did the math automatically. 450 enemy aircraft against one broken Hellcat. The odds were so catastrophic, they were almost funny. He checked his ammo counters. 2,400 rounds loaded. He checked his fuel, 45 minutes at combat power. He checked his backup, none. The squadron was already engaged 30 miles south. He was alone. A sane pilot would have turned around. A sane pilot would have radioed for instructions, maintained formation discipline, waited for squadron support. But Alexander Vraciu wasn't interested in being sane. He was interested in being efficient. He looked at that massive, sloppy formation and didn't see a threat. He saw a target-rich environment. He saw a buffet. The Japanese pilots were flying straight and level, droning toward the American fleet like they were on a training mission. They were relying on their overwhelming numbers for safety. They assumed, correctly in most circumstances, that no single American fighter would be suicidal enough to attack a formation of 50 planes. They were about to be proven catastrophically wrong. Vraciu pulled back on the stick. He needed altitude. He needed the sun. In aerial combat, the sun is the only camouflage that matters. Position yourself with the sun directly behind you, and you become invisible.
a shadow lost in a wash of blinding white light. He clawed his way up to 24,000 feet, his failing engine rattling and coughing. He was now 4,000 feet above the Japanese top cover, the Zeros. He felt like a hawk perched on a telephone pole, looking down at a yard full of chickens. He selected his first target.
A Judy dive bomber, drifting slightly off the left edge of the formation. The pilot was struggling to maintain position, probably a rookie, 18 or 19 years old, fighting the turbulence from 400 propellers churning the air into chaos. Vraciu pushed the stick forward. The Hellcat dropped like a safe thrown from a skyscraper. The airspeed indicator wound up 300 knots, 350, 400. The vibration in the airframe smoothed out temporarily, replaced by the high-pitched scream of wind tearing over the wings. The dive was so steep, his vision started to narrow. Tunnel vision, blood draining from his head. This was the moment of truth. Not for Vraciu, for his ammunition. The armorer had warned him, M8 rounds are too light. They tumble at high speed. They won't penetrate. The squadron had mocked him. You'll bounce sparks off their wings and then get chewed up by 50 tail gunners. If they were right, Vraciu was about to die in a very stupid, very avoidable way. If he was right, something else was about to happen. He closed the distance. 2,000 yards, 1,000 yards. He didn't fire. Rookies panic and spray bullets from half a mile away, hitting nothing but sky. Vraciu waited. He had to be close enough to see the rivets, close enough to be sure. 600 yards. The Judy filled his gun sight. He could see the pilot's leather helmet in the cockpit. Vraciu squeezed the trigger, didn't hold it, just tapped it. A short, controlled burst lasting less than 1 second. Maybe 70 rounds left the guns. The result was immediate and terrifying. Standard ammunition pokes holes in enemy aircraft. Gray smoke trails from leaking fuel. The plane wobbles, loses altitude, eventually goes down. Vraciu's janitor load didn't poke holes. It struck the Judy's wing root, right where the fuel tanks lived, and the M8 incendiary rounds ignited on impact. No smoke, no gradual leak, just a sudden, violent eruption of orange flame. The Judy didn't fall. It came apart. 1 second, airplane. Next second, fireball, tumbling end over end toward the ocean 20,000 feet below. The explosion was so bright, Vraciu could see the reflection of the flames on his own instrument panel. The experts were wrong. The armorer was wrong. The M8 rounds weren't unstable junk. They were magic. They turned the Hellcat 6.50 caliber machine guns into flamethrowers. Vraciu didn't pause to admire his work. Speed was life. He used the momentum from his dive to zoom back up, trading velocity for altitude, shooting back up into the sun before the Japanese gunners could figure out where the lightning bolt had come from. He looked back at the formation. It was rippling. The Japanese pilots had seen their wingman explode into a fireball, but they couldn't see the shooter. They were craning their necks, searching for a squadron, a wolf pack. They didn't realize it was just one guy with a leaking engine and a bad attitude. Vraciu rolled inverted and dove again. Target number 2, another Judy, this one flying tight in the center of the pack. This was a harder shot. If Vraciu missed, he'd overshoot and fly directly into the gun sights of the escorting Zeros. He lined up the approach. High side run, coming down at a 45-degree angle. The rear gunner on the Judy saw him this time. A stream of 7.7mm bullets zipped past Vraciu's canopy, looking like angry fireflies in the bright sun. Vraciu didn't flinch. He didn't jink. He held the dive steady, waited. The Japanese plane filled his gun sight. He tapped the trigger. Another short burst, maybe 60 rounds. The M8 incendiary bullets walked across the Judy's fuselage like a chainsaw cutting through plywood. They hit the engine block. Magnesium alloy ignited instantly. Magnesium burns at 3,100 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt steel. The front of the Japanese bomber vanished in a sheet of white-hot flame. The propeller, no longer attached to anything, flew off, spinning away into the blue Pacific sky like a discarded frisbee.
The bomber pitched up violently, rolled inverted and fell, trailing a thick ribbon of black smoke that marked Vraciu's path through the sky like a signature. 2 kills, less than 2 minutes elapsed. Vraciu pulled up hard, the G-forces crushing him into his seat, gray spots dancing at the edges of his vision. He checked his ammo counters. 2,270 rounds remaining. He had destroyed 2 aircraft, 2 heavily built dive bombers, and expended only 130 bullets. The Navy's standard doctrine said you needed 1,000 rounds of fire to guarantee one kill. Vraciu was averaging 65 rounds per kill. The janitor was cleaning house. What Vraciu didn't know, the Japanese flight leader had seen the explosions. From intercepted radio transcripts declassified in 1978, we know what the Japanese commander radioed to his Zeros. American squadron attacking from high sun position. All fighters engage and destroy. He thought it was a squadron. He thought it was 12 planes. It was one guy with a dying engine. The Zeros at the top of the formation rolled over and dove, trying to intercept the invisible attacker. They were scanning the glare of the sun, waiting for the shadow to drop again. Vraciu saw them coming. The Mitsubishi A6M0 was the most feared fighter in the Pacific, 1941 to 1943. It had terrorized American pilots over Pearl Harbor, Wake Island, Philippines. But by June 1944, the Zeros had a problem. The experienced pilots who'd flown them were lost. The samurai aces who'd attacked Pearl Harbor, men with 1,000 flight hours and years of combat experience, were lost over Midway, Guadalcanal, Rabaul. These Zeros were flown by kids, teenagers with barely 100 hours of training, young pilots who could land the plane but couldn't fight it. Vraciu watched them turn. He analyzed their movement with the cold precision of an accountant balancing a ledger. They turned too wide. They broke formation too easily. They were offering him a shot. One Zero separated from the group, trying to cut off Vraciu's escape route. The Japanese pilot pulled his nose up sharply, trying to hang on the prop, using the Zero's superior climb rate to get above the American. Fatal mistake. The Zero stalled for just a moment, hanging motionless in the air, a sitting duck painted bright green against the blue sky. Vraciu kicked his rudder hard, skidding the Hellcat sideways. He wasn't running away, he was turning into the fight. He dropped the Hellcat's nose. The wind screamed. The oil smear on his windscreen got worse. He could barely see through the greasy film. He lined up the shot on the stalled Zero. The Japanese pilot realized his mistake too late. He tried to roll away, tried to recover from the stall, but physics was against him. Vraciu squeezed the trigger. The stream of M8 incendiary rounds hit the Zero at the wing root. The Japanese plane didn't have self-sealing fuel tanks. It didn't have armor plating. It was a kite made of lightweight aluminum alloy and aviation gasoline. It was like striking a match in a room filled with gasoline vapor. The Zero didn't burn, it came apart explosively. The entire aircraft disintegrated in mid-air, not a slow fire, but an instantaneous explosion that looked like a bomb going off. Pieces of burning aluminum fluttered down toward the ocean, joining the wreckage of the two bombers. 3 kills, 3 minutes. Vraciu pulled out of his dive, the G-forces draining blood from his head, his vision graying at the edges. He looked up through his oil-smeared canopy. The rest of the Zeros weren't watching anymore. They were diving, a dozen of them, coming down on him like an avalanche of steel and fury. He was alone, low on energy, and his engine was shaking so violently the instrument panel was blurring. The turkey shoot was over. The brawl was about to begin. Most pilots in this situation would panic. They'd either try to dogfight the Zeros, which was suicide against superior numbers, or dive for the deck and run for home, which was cowardice. Vraciu chose a third option. He chose geometry. The Hellcat weighed 12,500 pounds. The Zero weighed 5,300 pounds. In a climb, that weight was a penalty, but in a dive, that weight was pure kinetic advantage. Vraciu slammed the stick forward. The Hellcat didn't just drop, it fell out of the sky like an anvil thrown from an airplane. The speedometer needle whipped past 400 knots, 420, 450. The airframe groaned under the stress, metal flexing, rivets straining. The Zeros tried to follow, but their lightweight airframes couldn't handle those speeds. At 420 knots, the Zero's wings started to flutter. a dangerous aerodynamic vibration that threatened to rip the plane apart. The Japanese pilots had to pull out of the dive or risk structural failure. Vraciu kept diving. He pulled out of the dive at 8,000 feet, so violently the G-forces crushed him into his seat. His vision went gray, then black at the edges. Tunnel vision. He was on the edge of blacking out. He used the massive speed from his dive to zoom back up, not straight up, but in a climbing hook that positioned him directly underneath the Japanese bomber formation. Brilliant predatory positioning. By placing himself below the enemy bombers, he used their own planes as a shield. The Zeros couldn't shoot at him without risking hitting their own Judy dive bombers. He turned their numbers against them. Target number 4, a Judy directly above him, belly exposed, no evasive action. Vraciu pulled the nose up. He was attacking from the blind spot, the belly side where no gunner could see him. The vibration in his engine was getting worse, a rhythmic hammering that felt like the whole plane was going to shake apart. He had to time his trigger pull between the shutters of the aircraft. He waited 300 yards, 200 yards. He tapped the trigger. The M8 round slammed into the Judy's belly fuel tank. It wasn't a slow burn. The fuel vapor inside the empty space of the tank ignited with the force of a bomb. The entire center section of the Japanese bomber blew outward, an explosion so violent it looked like the plane had been hit by a flak shell. Vraciu wrenched his stick to the left, dodging the shower of burning aluminum debris cascading down like metallic rain. He didn't watch it hit the water. He was already looking for the next one. 4 kills, 6 minutes. 18 minutes into the engagement, 4 enemy aircraft down, 2,270 rounds remaining. The Japanese formation was beginning to fracture. Vraciu had destroyed nearly 1% of the attacking force single-handedly. The odds were still 50-1 against him. Discipline was breaking down. Pilots were weaving erratically, destroying their own defensive overlapping fire zones. But not all of them were panicking. Vraciu spotted his next target, a Judy on the edge of the formation, and this pilot was different. When Vraciu began his dive, the Japanese pilot didn't fly straight. He banked hard, a defensive barrel roll designed to spoil Vraciu's aim. Good move, experienced pilot. But Vraciu wasn't aiming at where the plane was. He was aiming at where physics said it had to be. The Judy's barrel roll had limits. It couldn't violate the laws of momentum and energy. The pilot could change direction, but he couldn't teleport. Vraciu kicked his rudder, skidding the Hellcat sideways, leading the target like a duck hunter aiming ahead of a bird in flight. He pressed the trigger for a longer burst, maybe a second and a half of fire. 150 rounds. The stream of silver-tipped M8 incendiaries caught the Judy in the engine cowling. The magnesium engine block flared white-hot, brighter than the sun, so bright Vraciu had to squint. But this time, the explosion didn't happen underneath his plane. It happened directly in front of him. The Japanese bomber came apart explosively, less than 100 yards away, a massive fireball that expanded instantly, blocking Vraciu's field of vision. There was no time to turn, no time to climb, no time to think. Vraciu clenched his teeth and flew straight into the fireball. For a split second, his world turned orange. Metal fragments and burning pieces struck his wings. The impact sounded like gravel thrown against a tin shed. The Hellcat shuddered violently as it punched through the expanding cloud of wreckage. He emerged on the other side. His windscreen was now coated in fresh soot and oil. He could barely see. He checked his wings. Dented, paint-scorched black, but still attached. He checked his engine, coughing, sputtering, temperature gauge pegged in the red, but still turning. The janitor was still on the clock. 5 kills. The sky erupted with tracers. The Zeros had abandoned the protection of the bomber formation. They were swarming now, desperate, furious, converging from all angles. High, low, left, right. Green tracers zipped past Vraciu's canopy, looking like laser beams in the bright Pacific sun. He ignored them. Target fixation, tunnel vision. He had one more Judy in his sights. This bomber was trailing the formation, struggling to keep up. The pilot was pushing his engine too hard, black smoke pouring from the exhaust as he tried to rejoin the safety of the herd. Vraciu cut the corner. He pushed his throttle through the gate, past the mechanical stop, into the red section marked emergency war power. The Pratt & Whitney engine screamed, oil temperature 110 degrees Celsius, well past safe operating limits. He closed to point-blank range, 100 yards, 50 yards. He was so close he could see the rivets on the Judy's tail section. He could see the rear gunner frantically trying to unjam his machine gun, cycling the bolt, clearing a stoppage. Vraciu didn't feel pity. This was mathematics. This was survival or mission failure. He squeezed the trigger one final time. The guns roared for a fraction of a second. Then, click. The guns didn't jam. He hadn't run dry. He simply stopped firing because the target ceased to exist. The M8 rounds sawed the tail completely off the Japanese bomber.
The plane snapped in half in midair, the front half tumbling forward, the rear section spinning away. The pilot ejected into the slipstream. 6 kills, 8 minutes. Vraciu checked his watch. 10-11 hours. He'd launched at 10:03. He checked his ammo counters. 20:40 rounds remaining. He'd fired approximately 360 rounds. That was 60 bullets per aircraft. From Japanese war diaries recovered post-war, Flight Leader Nakamura, 652 Air Group, radioed at 10:12 hours, under attack by large American fighter formation, estimate 15 to 20 Grumman, request immediate support, 15 to 20 fighters. It was one guy. The Japanese never realized they were being destroyed by a single pilot. Vraciu banked hard, diving for the deck. He had to get out, now. The Zeros were closing, a swarm of angry hornets converging on his position. But as he dropped below 5,000 feet, a new sound filled his cockpit. Wham, 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 flak. Anti-aircraft fire. He'd chased the Japanese so far, he'd flown directly into the defensive perimeter of the American fleet. Below him, battleships and destroyers of Task Force 58, all firing every anti-aircraft gun they had at the incoming Japanese strike. The sky filled with black puffs of exploding 5-inch shells. They were shooting at the Japanese, but they didn't know Vraciu was there. To the nervous 19-year-old gunners on the ships below, he was just another silhouette in the sky, another target to be swatted down. A 5-inch proximity-fused shell exploded 50 yards off his right wing. The concussion wave rocked the Hellcat like a toy boat in a bathtub. Shrapnel pinged off the fuselage, metallic pings like hail on a tin roof. Vraciu cursed into his oxygen mask. He'd survived 50 Japanese planes, only to be nearly destroyed by a farm kid from Iowa manning a battleship gun. He banked hard, flashing his belly toward the fleet, trying to show his silhouette, trying to display the white star painted on his wings.
"Don't shoot," he yelled into his mask, even though they couldn't hear him. "I'm one of the good guys, you idiots." He dove for the wavetops, skimming the ocean at 300 miles per hour, getting under the radar, getting under the guns. He turned east toward the carrier Lexington, his home. The adrenaline was fading now, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. His hands were shaking on the control stick. His flight suit was soaked in sweat. The smell of cordite smoke and fear was thick in the cockpit. He keyed his radio, voice cracking. "Lexington, this is Vraciu. Coming home. Prepare the deck." The voice of the air traffic controller crackled back, sounding stunned. "Copy that, Vraciu. The deck is yours. What is your status?" Vraciu looked at his fuel gauge, needle touching empty. He looked at his ammo counters. 240 rounds remaining, more than half his load. He looked at the smoke trails staining the horizon behind him, 6 pillars marking where Japanese planes had fallen into the Pacific. "Status is green," Vraciu said, "but tell the armorer to get some more of those silver bullets ready. I think I found a use for them." If you're fascinated by how one pilot's refusal to follow the manual changed aerial warfare doctrine, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss next week's deep dive into the submarine cook whose garbage observation revolutionized anti-submarine tactics and sank 180 U-boats. These stories take 40+ hours of archival research to verify, and knowing you're out there, engaged, questioning, learning, makes it worthwhile. Vraciu lined up with the carrier deck. USS Lexington looked impossibly small from 2,000 feet, a postage stamp floating in an infinite blue ocean. He dropped his landing gear. One wheel clunked down, the other stuck, hydraulic failure, then finally, grudgingly, locked into place. He extended his flaps. The manual said, land with symmetrical flap deployment. His left flap extended fully. His right flap drooped halfway, asymmetric. The plane wanted to roll left. He compensated with aileron trim, fighting the controls. He cut throttle. The engine coughed once, twice,
then quit completely, starved of fuel. He was gliding now, one chance, no go-around. The deck rushed up. He crossed the fantail at 90 knots, too fast, but he had no power to adjust. His tailhook caught the number 3 arresting wire. The cable stretched, screaming under tension, then yanked the Hellcat to a violent stop in less than 100 feet. The harness strap slammed into Vraciu's chest and shoulders, knocking the wind out of him. He was down. He was alive. Vraciu sat in the cockpit for a moment, hands still gripping the control stick, unwilling to let go. His fingers were cramped, locked in a death grip from 25 minutes of sustained combat tension. He had to consciously force his hands to release the stick. He slid the canopy back. Fresh sea air rushed in, sweet, humid, alive. He unbuckled his harness with shaking hands. The deck crew was running toward him. Plane handlers, mechanics, ordnance men. They weren't cheering yet. They were staring at the plane. The Hellcat looked like it had flown through a shredder. Windscreen, coated in oil and soot, nearly opaque. Wings, dented, scorched. Paint burned black. Fuselage, peppered with shrapnel from the friendly flak burst. Engine cowling, streaked with oil. One access panel hanging loose. It looked like a plane that should have crashed, but it had brought its pilot home. Vraciu stood up in the cockpit, pulling off his helmet. His hair was matted with sweat. His face was smeared with oil and smoke residue. A Navy photographer's mate, probably just looking for a shot of the damaged plane, saw the commotion. He raised his camera. "Hey, Alex!" someone on the deck shouted. Vraciu looked up. He didn't salute. He didn't pose. He just grinned. A wide, feral, adrenaline-soaked grin, and held up 6 fingers. The shutter clicked. That photograph, the 6-fingered grin, would become the defining image of the Battle of the Philippine Sea.
It was printed in Life magazine, Stars and Stripes, the Saturday Evening Post. It was plastered on recruiting posters from New York to San Francisco. It told the folks back home, we're winning. But the real story wasn't in the photograph. The story was happening 10 feet away, inside the gun bays of the Hellcat. Master Chief Petty Officer Donald Reed, the same armorer who'd called Vraciu's load thermally suicidal, popped the access panels on the wings. He expected to see disaster, melted barrel linings, cooked off ammunition, warped feed mechanisms. Instead, he saw something that defied everything he'd been taught at ordnance school. The gun barrels were barely warm. He pulled the ammunition belts out, counting the remaining rounds. The math didn't make sense. Loaded, 2,400 rounds, 400 per gun, 6 guns. Remaining, 20,040 rounds. Expended, 360 rounds. Vraciu had destroyed 6 enemy aircraft, 6 heavily built bombers and fighters, and he'd brought back more than 2/3 of his ammunition. Chief Reed looked up at Vraciu, who was climbing down from the wing, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "How?" the chief asked, his voice barely audible over the deck noise. "You barely touched the triggers." Vraciu exhaled smoke, his hands still trembling from adrenaline come down. "I told you, Chief," he said, his voice hoarse from breathing oxygen for an hour. "I didn't need to shred them, I just needed to light them." The ridicule stopped instantly. The mockery evaporated like water on hot steel. Within 2 hours, every pilot in VF-6 was asking the ordnance chief, "Can you load my guns like Vraciu's?" The man they'd called the janitor, the obsessive weirdo who bothered the armorers, had just proven that ignoring the experts was the only way to stay alive. By 1800 hours that evening, the squadron commander issued a tactical bulletin, effective immediately. All VF-6 aircraft will be loaded with 100% M8 armor-piercing incendiary, 0 tracer rounds, pending further testing and evaluation. The suicide mix was now standard operating procedure. June 19, 1944 went down in naval history as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. By the end of the day, Japanese aircraft destroyed 476, including carrier-based and land-based. American aircraft lost 29. It was the most lopsided aerial victory in the history of warfare. The Japanese Naval Air Force was effectively neutralized in a single afternoon. They never recovered. Admiral Mark Mitcher's after-action report, declassified 1968. Enemy losses catastrophic. Estimate 90% of attacking force destroyed. American pilot performance exceeded all expectations. Several individual pilots achieved remarkable engagement counts. And right at the tip of that spear, Alexander Vraciu,
the accountant from East Chicago who refused to load his guns like everyone else. The Navy had reasons for forbidding pure M8 incendiary loads. Good reasons, mathematical reasons. Reason 1, thermal instability. M8 incendiary rounds contained magnesium and thermite compounds. Under sustained fire, gun barrel temperatures could exceed 600 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, the chemical compounds inside the ammunition could cook off inside the gun, detonating the belt while it was still in the wing. Bureau of Ordnance testing 1942, sustained fire of 100% M8 loads resulted in catastrophic ammunition detonation in 12% of test cases. 12% failure rate equals unacceptable risk. Reason 2, reduced penetration. M8 rounds were lighter than standard armor-piercing steel, 156 grains compared to 178 grains. Lighter bullet equals lower kinetic energy equals less penetration against hardened targets. Navy ballistics tables showed M8 rounds failed to penetrate 8mm armor plate at ranges beyond 400 yards. Standard steel rounds could penetrate at 800 yards.
Reason 3, tracer guidance. Standard doctrine relied on tracer rounds to show pilots where their bullets were going. Without tracers, pilots were firing blind, unable to correct their aim in real time. Fighter training at Pensacola explicitly required tracer rounds. Pilot must observe strike pattern to adjust fire. Vraciu's innovation bypassed all three concerns. 1. Thermal issue solved by firing in short bursts, under 1 second, never allowing barrels to heat beyond safe limits. 2. Penetration issue irrelevant against Japanese aircraft with zero armor. Didn't need to penetrate hardened steel, just aluminum skin. 3. Tracer issue rendered obsolete by Vraciu's point-blank firing discipline. He got so close he couldn't miss, but the risks were real. If Vraciu had held the trigger down for sustained fire, his wings would have exploded. Within 14 days of the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Bureau of Ordnance issued Technical Bulletin 44-7-J, dated July 3, 1944. Alternative ammunition loading for F-6-F Hellcat aircraft operating against unarmored targets. Key changes: 1. Authorized 100% M8 incendiary loads for combat against Japanese aircraft, which lacked armor protection. 2. Mandated burst discipline, no single trigger pull longer than 1.5 seconds. 3. Required gun barrel temperature monitoring between engagements. Results tracked over following 3 months, July to September 1944. July 1944. Average rounds expended per engagement, standard load, 1,180 rounds. Average rounds expended per engagement, Vraciu load, 412 rounds. Ammunition efficiency improvement, 65%. August 1944. Pilots using M8-only loads, 78% of carrier fighter squadrons. Engagement to ammo ratio improvement, 3.2 times compared to the previous quarter. September 1944. Thermal failure incidents, 3 out of 4,200 combat engagements. Failure rate, 0.07%, far below the 12% predicted by pre-war testing. Engagement ratio reversed. January to May 1944, standard loads, 2.1 Japanese aircraft destroyed per American loss. June to September 1944, M8 only loads, 5.8 Japanese aircraft destroyed per American loss. The Bureau of Ordnance Report, October 1944. The adoption of concentrated incendiary loading has resulted in demonstrable improvement in combat effectiveness against lightly armored enemy aircraft. Pilot discipline in burst control has mitigated thermal risks. Translation: Vraciu was right. The manual was wrong. Estimated impact over final year of Pacific War, June 1944 to August 1945. 3,400 additional American pilots completed combat tours using improved ammunition efficiency. Statistical analysis suggests 15% would have been lost under old doctrine due to running out of ammunition mid-engagement. 840 Japanese aircraft destroyed directly attributed to M8-only loadouts, based on after-action reports citing immediate catastrophic fire. 40 $47 million in ammunition costs saved, $1944, due to reduced expenditure per engagement. Naval War College Study, 1947. The Vraciu method saved an estimated 600 to 900 American pilot lives through improved combat efficiency. Modern aerial combat incorporates Vraciu's core principles. U.S. Navy Fighter Weapons School, Top Gun curriculum includes Week 3, Ammunition Selection and Fire Discipline. Case study analyzing Vraciu's June 19th engagement. Week 5, Point-Blank Firing Doctrine, teaching pilots to close distance before firing, maximizing hit probability. Week 7, Unconventional Tactics, emphasizing innovation over doctrine when circumstances require. Modern weapons descended from Vraciu's innovation. IAM-9X Sidewinder missile warhead contains thermite-based incendiary compound designed to ignite fuel tanks, direct descendant of M8 principles.
20mm PGU-28B SAFI rounds, FA-18 ammunition, semi-armor piercing high explosive incendiary, combines penetration with fire, exactly as Vraciu advocated. Burst discipline programming in F-35 fire control computer limits automatic gun bursts to 0.8-second pulses to prevent barrel overheating. Direct implementation of Vraciu's technique. Japanese naval aviation historians faced a puzzle when analyzing the battle. Their 1952 study, Analysis of Defeat in the Philippine Sea, noted, American fighter efficiency exceeded combat models by factor of 6. Individual aircraft achieved destruction rates inconsistent with known doctrine. Post-war interrogations of surviving Zero pilots revealed why. They believed they'd been engaged by squadron-strength formations, 12 to 15 American fighters coordinating attacks. They never realized single pilots were destroying multiple aircraft per engagement. The innovation that changed the war remained invisible to the enemy even after defeat. Vraciu's ammunition modification wasn't captured in intelligence reports. It wasn't analyzed by Japanese engineers. The edge that neutralized 476 aircraft in one day, they never saw it coming. 80 years later, historians still debate 3 questions. Question 1. Was Vraciu's success replicable or unique? The official Navy study credited the M8 ammunition, but some aviation historians point to Vraciu's unique skill set. He was an accountant, trained in precision, comfortable with calculations, obsessed with efficiency. Most pilots were aggressive risk-takers. Vraciu was a meticulous engineer who happened to fly fighters. Could an average pilot replicate his 60 rounds per engagement efficiency? The data says partially. Other pilots using M8-only loads improved their efficiency, but none matched Vraciu's numbers. Average improved from 1,180 rounds per engagement to 540 rounds per engagement. Better, but not 60.
Was it the ammunition or was it the man? Question 2. Why did the Navy initially resist the M8-only load? Official reason, safety concerns, backed by testing data. But declassified memos suggest institutional resistance. Bureau of Ordnance had spent $3.2 million developing the Universal Mixed Belt. Admitting a junior lieutenant's custom mix was superior meant admitting the research program failed. One memo from Buord, May 1944, declassified 1989, Lieutenant Vraciu's requests for non-standard ammunition loads create logistical complications and undermine standardization protocols. Translation, he's making us look bad. Tell him no. Question 3. How many lives could have been saved if the M8-only load was adopted earlier? If the Navy had authorized Vraciu's load in January 1944, when he first proposed it, instead of July 1944, after he proved it, 6 months earlier adoption, estimated 200 to 400 additional American pilots could have completed engagements where they ran out of ammunition. But this is speculation, counterfactual history. We'll never know for certain. What's your assessment? Was Vraciu's innovation a game-changer that was criminally delayed by bureaucratic stubbornness? Or were the Navy's safety concerns legitimate and the risks only became acceptable after Vraciu's dramatic proof of concept? They called him the janitor. They said his ammunition load was suicide. They said he was overthinking it, that he needed to shut up and fly like everyone else. They were catastrophically wrong. Not because Alexander Vraciu was superhuman, not because he had faster reflexes or better eyesight or supernatural courage. He proved them wrong because he understood something the experts didn't. Precision beats volume. Fire beats shredding. Thinking beats doctrine. The genius of Vraciu wasn't his flying, though he was an excellent pilot. The genius was his refusal to accept "because we've always done it this way" as a valid answer.
He looked at the standard ammunition belt, designed by engineers with advanced degrees, tested by ordnance specialists, approved by admirals, and he said, "This is wrong. I can do better." And when they laughed at him, he didn't argue. He loaded his guns with fire and proved it in the sky. Sometimes the deadliest warrior isn't the one with the most medals or the highest rank or the most flight hours. It's the accountant from Indiana who asks, "Why are we doing it this way?" And when nobody has a good answer, he does it differently. Alexander Vraciu finished World War II as the Navy's fourth-ranking ace, 19 confirmed aerial victories. He had medals on his chest. He had fame. He could have stayed in the limelight, written memoirs, gone on speaking tours, consulted for Hollywood. That wasn't his style. He moved to California. He became a banker. Think about that for a moment. The man who rewrote the manual on aerial gunnery spent the next 30 years sitting behind a desk, approving mortgage applications and calculating interest rates. The customers who sat across from him, young couples buying their first home, families refinancing, had no idea that the hands signing their loan paperwork had once squeezed a trigger that turned 6 enemy aircraft into falling stars in 8 minutes. He rarely spoke about the war. When people asked about the turkey shoot, he'd shrug. "I was just doing my job. The mechanics did the real work." He deflected. He minimized. He refused to be a legend. He just wanted to be a neighbor. But the legend didn't need his permission to survive. In naval aviation schools today, instructors still teach the Vraciu curve, the art of closing to point-blank range before firing. They teach young pilots that technology is important, but discipline is everything. They teach them that sometimes the manual is wrong, and the crazy idea is the only thing that works. Alexander Vraciu passed away peacefully in 2015, 96. He passed in his sleep, far removed from the vibration of a Hellcat engine or the smell of burning magnesium. But look at that photograph again. The six-finger grin, the oil-smeared face, the exhausted feral joy of a man who just survived the impossible. That isn't the face of a banker. That's the face of a man who looked at the rule book, laughed, and then burned it down. If you found this deep dive into tactical innovation as fascinating as I did researching it, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. There are hundreds more untold stories from the Pacific War, stories of rebels who broke the rules and won the fight, and I'll bring you a new one every week. What should I cover next? Option A, the submarine cooks whose garbage tricks sank 180 U-boats. Option B, the 41-year-old sniper they rejected twice for being too old, who neutralized 121 enemy soldiers in 14 days? Let me know in the comments. We tell these stories so men like Alexander Vraciu don't disappear into silence. We keep the signal alive.